Hello, welcome to another Life Science webcast from Cambridge Health Tech Media Group. I'm Kevin Davis, the editor of BioIT World, and delighted to be joined today by Mark Boguski. Mark, welcome.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Mark is about to unveil his new company, Resounding Health, at the BioIT World Expo at the end of April. He's dropped in to give us a sneak preview of what this new company is about. Mark has been somebody really at the forefront of many kinds of BioIT activities, from the government to academia to startups to big pharma, back to startups. So we're going to catch up on what you've been doing.
Great.
Mark, you were a physician originally, but of course you spent many years among a small band of true pioneers at GenBank. What do you most remember looking back on those days in sort of early to mid-90s?
Well, let me comment on being a physician for a moment. Everyone who wants to become a doctor usually goes into medicine because they want to help people. And most physicians end up doing that, seeing patients on a one-to-one basis. And that's tremendously gratifying because you can see the results of your actions immediately. But after I realized that I had some facility in research, I figured out that one could, by making an important biomedical discovery, could potentially help many more patients than you could see individually in a lifetime. And that's what led me into research originally and into the Genome Project and GenBank later.
So looking back at GenBank, of course, the amount of data in there is exploding, but none of that would be possible if it wasn't been for you and Dave Lippman and some of those other folks there.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. The first real explosion of GenBank was the express sequence tag strategy for sampling the expressed portions of genomes. GenBank had existed since 1982 when it was transferred to the National Center for Biotechnology Information about 1990 or so. And at that point, sequence entries were accumulating very slowly, not only because of the technology, but because of the strategy towards obtaining sequence data. And then in about 1993, I believe, or 1991, Craig Venter and others came up with this idea of sampling the genome through rapid sequencing of transcripts. And that led to a creation of a brand new division of GenBank called DBEST, the Database of Expressed Sequence Tags, which began the first exponential growth phase of the database.
And now, of course, we have, every week, it seems, with these next-gen sequencers, they're essentially producing the equivalent of what existed in GenBank just a few years ago. That's sort of extraordinary growth in terms of the field.
It is extraordinary. One of the problems I've recognized, though, is that the ability to produce data is far outstripping our ability to manage and analyze and interpret it, and I think that's an unsolved problem.
So you left NCBI and moved to Seattle, where you were one of the founding scientists, I guess, at Rosetta Informatics.
Well, actually, I was on the founding scientific advisory board several years earlier, but I decided to join the company as the senior vice president for research and development after the company had been in existence for about 2 or 3 years.
That was, of course, a remarkable company launched by Steve Friend, later acquired by Merck.
That's correct. I learned a lot there and had many fabulous experiences in that world. And it helped me later in pharma because I knew both sides of the game. I knew what biotechs had to do to be successful in proposing and signing collaborative deals with pharma. And once I got to pharma, I knew what the biotech strategies were on that side to get those deals. So it was really a fantastic experience.
The last time you spoke at BioIT World Expo a few years ago was in your capacity as the director of the Allen Brain Institute, Paul Allen's neuroscience facility, where you were there, I think, for a couple of years. What looking back, has been the sort of the contribution of that initiative in terms of the field of neuroscience, would you say?
Well, I think it really catalyzed the development of neurogenomics. One of Paul's motivations for starting the Institute was that he's a very curious guy and he follows lots of scientific developments. He had been following the decade of the brain, which was the 1990s. It also happened to be the decade in which the Human Genome Project was launched and largely completed. And Paul saw these things as parallel activities there was no intersection at all. And so he decided that what he wanted to do is bring the power of genomics to neuroscience, and that led to the founding of the Institute and also the inaugural project, the Allen Brain Atlas.
And that is now something that I think work is still going on, but it's something that is in use by researchers, mouse, and I'm sure other organisms as well, going on today.
Well, there was initially a lot of skepticism among classical neuroscientists, even molecular neuroscientists, that generating high volume data for the brain was not going to be as useful as it was for generating the human genome or transcriptomes, for instance. But I think they've all come around and really been convinced that it's been a major advance in this field.
From there, you moved to Novartis, coming back forward now, where Mark Fishman has been, for many years, been pulling together really a sort of a new cultural approach to big pharma research, bringing a lot of academics, with people who didn't have big pharma experience previously. You were there for 2 years, sort of leading the charge in terms of fields such as functional genomics and systems biology. Hopefully the statute of limitations has now passed. It's been a few years since you were there. What can you tell us about that experience and what you feel you might have been able to contribute to their research operation?
Well, let me first say that when I interviewed for the job, not only did I have to pass muster with Mark Fishman, but also Dan Vasella, the CEO of the company. And Dan met me in a conference room at the Four Seasons when he was in town to interview me, and he has a very disarming personality. And he said, "Well, Mark, it's Mark Fishman's decision whether to hire you or not. I'm just here to answer questions for you." So I said, "Well, the one big question I have, Dan, is why should anyone go into the pharmaceutical industry today?" And this was in the wake of Vioxx and a lot of other negative publicity. And he said, at the end of the day, you have to believe that we add net value to society. And I thought that was a very sincere and moving answer. And that's really the moment I decided to take the job.
I think Big Pharma has a sort of perhaps a problem, goes much beyond Novartis, in terms of how eagerly to embrace these sort of cutting-edge new technologies that come out of academic labs for the most part. Systems biology, in terms of its sort of reception within Big Pharma, seems to have had mixed reactions, mixed reviews. What do you think on that?
Well, I'd like to comment on that in the more general context of how big companies decide whether and when to adopt certain technologies. I ran a technologically oriented division of Novartis called Genome and Proteome Sciences. And on a rolling 2-year basis, we had to make decisions about technologies in terms of build, buy, or outsource. If there's a cutting-edge technology that is really going to become mission critical for you, you build it in-house. You have to, because there aren't any commodity providers of that yet. On the other hand, if there's a leading-edge technology that you're not sure is going to be mission critical, you test the waters with respect to that technology by collaborating with some of the leading academic labs in that field. And then eventually, even cutting-edge technologies over a couple of years or more become commodities, and you have to decide, once again, almost on a rolling 2-year basis, whether to build, buy, or outsource, and what you have built internally can now be commoditized and outsourced.
I can't resist asking, before we get to your new company, build, buy, or outsource, what do you think then are the prospects for Complete Genomics offering whole genome sequencing with an eye to the big pharma community?
Well, I'm one of those people who believes that once the data produced, people will find useful uses for it, if you will. So we don't really anticipate what those uses are going to be, but I would be optimistic that they'll find their niche.
Well, you left Novartis with a concept, I believe, in mind for a new startup company, and that is what you're here to talk about. The company's called Resounding Health. What is its mission, and how did you get that interesting name?
Well, my experience in the pharma industry, and to a large extent in biotech as well, is that it takes too long to address unmet medical needs. I mean, one of the things we always talked about in pharma was our job is to address unmet medical needs. But even after decades of investment in basic science, technology development, it still takes 10 to 15 years and $800 million to $1.5 billion to make a new drug to address a single unmet medical need. And I decided that there was another unmet medical need that really was under-recognized and largely unmet, and that's the need of consumers and doctors for better information.
So, Resounding Health, where did you get the name from?
Well, the original concept was that we were going to develop a deep vertical in the health information space. If search engines like Google and Yahoo are broad horizontal search platforms, we felt that medical information was special and needed a vertical organization to be maximally effective. And so the working name for the company initially was Vertical Health. But when our lawyers went to incorporate, they found that that one was taken. And I was kind of in a quandary thinking of a new name. It turns out that the eureka moment came when I was sitting in the audience at a performance of the Chicago Symphony. I was visiting my daughter, who's a music student, and we were watching the symphony together. And during the intermission, I was looking through the program book, and the Chicago Symphony has its own record label called CSO Resound, and that was when I decided it was going to be Resounding Health.
Okay. There's a lot of information already available on the internet. What is so special then about Resounding Health? What are you able to offer, or how are you able to offer it that is going to potentially fill an unmet need?
Well, there is a lot of information, and that's really part of the problem. There's so many vertical or quasi-vertical sites out there that it's very confusing to consumers. These sites often contain a mixture of information that is public or proprietary, designed for patients, designed for physicians, and I hear complaints all the time about people finding things on the web that they're uncertain about, or they're frustrated or even scared sometimes with the information they find.
So how would this compare to a WebMD or other sites that people may be familiar with?
Well, I think WebMD does a terrific job. I think, however, that they're more of like an online magazine than really a Web 2.0 company, and we're trying to do something a little different.
Who is your principal audience? Is it the consumer, or is it the physician, or are you going to tier it and keep everybody happy?
Well, originally it was direct to consumer only, but as I researched more and more and did my due diligence on this, it turns out that technology and scientific advances go on so rapidly today that people who went to medical school even as little as 2 or 3 years ago are not up on the latest relevant topics that could improve their practice. So it's primarily a direct-to-consumer thrust, but what we're doing is we're trying to develop methods for joint consumer-provider or patient-provider review of the information. Right now, doctors usually cringe when a patient comes out into their office for an appointment with, 55 pages of output from a Google search, and they really don't want to deal with it. And what we're trying to do is make both patient-friendly and physician-friendly tools that won't threaten or intimidate anybody, but will be really useful for joint patient-provider review of information.
And how much of your thinking has been stimulated by the sort of the explosion in the consumer genomics field and people doing whole genome scans and maybe in a few years whole genome sequencing? Is that just a small part of what you're offering?
It's a very small part. Originally, I thought it might be more prominent, but when I started looking at consumer genomics and the kind of annotation or information that's provided back to the consumer from the various companies, I realized that consumer genomics and the communication of medical and health information in that technology area was really just a small part of the overall challenge with communicating any medical information to consumers. And so we stepped back and broadened our approach considerably.
And who is your key technology partner in this operation?
His name is Alan Littleford. Dr. Alan Littleford's a mathematician by training, and he went into math after initially entertaining a career as a professional pianist. But I think he broke his arm or something and decided that he wasn't going to be in the top tier of music performance. So he went into mathematics and then found computer science about 30 years ago and moved to Silicon Valley and has been a very well-known consultant for VCs doing due diligence on new companies. He's launched companies himself. He's been the chief technology officer. And this goes back to why we like the name of the company, Resounding Health, so much, because he is a musician and we got the inspiration in a musical performance.
So in conclusion, you're putting the finishing touches to the website now. I presume it'll be ready to launch about the time you give your talk at BioIT World Expo at the end of April. What if I go there? What am I going to be able to find there? I mean, do I need to be unhealthy in order to get valuable information, or what can I look forward to?
Well, what we'll be launching at the end of April is a true alpha site. So we're not claiming it's going to be as polished as one gets to during a beta phase of development. But let me tell you a little bit about the idea behind it. And kind of this goes back to my experience in neuroscience at the Allen Institute. The underlying metaphor for what we're doing is is that of the immature or developing brain. As most biologists know, immature brains form many connections, too many in fact, and those connections, the non-functional ones, are pruned away by learning and experience. And so what we've done is we've done an immature brain of medicine by connecting medical concepts, medical topics, and drugs. And as users use the site, the less important, less functional connections will be pruned away, and it will just get better with use.
Well, we look forward to seeing the debut of resoundinghealth.com. Is that the URL?
Yes, it is. Let me tell you about another little offshoot project, though, which my wife, who's a retired pediatrician, has created. And the reason I mention it in this context is because she used the Resounding Health tools to research this new site. Before I tell you the name, which you'll probably grin at, let me give you sort of the serious background first. In medicine, when you're training, you're doing rounds on patients, and when you're a student, you have textbook or theoretical knowledge of a disease. But there's a phenomenon called a teachable moment in medicine, where you encounter a patient that has an absolutely textbook case of a disease, and that becomes a teachable moment to transform book learning into tangible lessons that will last a lifetime. It's been thought in the past that those teachable moments are fortuitous and unpredictable, but we feel that we can create a serial collection of teachable moments designed to inform consumers about their health and medical matters. So the website, which is online even today, is called www.celebritydiagnosis.com, and we're combining teachable moments with the power of celebrity to increase health awareness, health literacy, and hopefully health care.
And that's a blog founded by your wife?
It's a blog format, yes, and each blog entry is what we hope to be a teachable moment.
All right, well, Mark, thank you again for dropping in on us. Your talk will be at BioIT World Expo, April 27th to the 29th, 2009 in Boston. We look forward to that. We look forward to the debut of Resounding Health's new website. I'm Kevin Davis for BioIT World. Thanks for watching.